How's it going, everybody? So I was just here drinking my tonic herb coffee with yerba mate and happened to get a notification on my YouTube from a comment from one of my subscribers. Basically, I've been summoned forth, and basically what my subscriber said was, please make a video on the effects of caffeine, long-term use on the brain. I'm hopelessly addicted and can only manage to quit drinking coffee for 2 weeks at best. Also, marijuana has recently been legalized recreationally in my state, which I use occasionally for anxiety, yada yada. I was hoping you'd make a full video on your take on it. Been following you for some time now, and it seems as a subject rarely discussed. Thanks. And this is a comment left by my subscriber that goes by the name of the Omega Eyes. Okay, so first of all, yeah, this person's been subscribed to me since like 2016, and I always appreciate their comments because they're always productive comments. So yeah, this is a really good comment. Actually, it's a really good subject for a video. So first of all, I actually have made videos on caffeine in relation to its potential negative side effects, but the last video I made on that subject in particular was probably around 2016, 2017. And basically what I said in that video is that a lot of the negative side effects that people seem to have from caffeine, at least from clients that I've had or from people on my comment section, a lot of them actually seem to be nocebos. A lot of people, they will drink like I had a girl I was kind of dating for like a couple weeks who would drink like a Diet Coke, like a can of it, and then she'd say, oh, that's all I can handle, and she'd say she'd get really jittery and anxious from like the measly 30 to 60 milligrams of caffeine that was in that Diet Coke. I think it was actually like 34 milligrams or something. I don't know. I don't really care about Diet Coke. But she's like, yeah, I get like panic attacks and anxiety attacks from this 34 milligrams of caffeine. And the fact of the matter is, first of all, the evidence on caffeine consumption points towards tolerance levels before you get negative side effects like that, being the dose has to be relatively high. And, you know, you could kind of argue that there's a lot of individuals who have genetic polymorphisms that actually make their body detox caffeine slower. And it is technically the right term, detox. Like basically their liver, the half-life of caffeine is a lot longer, basically, to where caffeine stays in their system longer. But look, if the dosage is so low, like even if you take 60 milligrams of caffeine, that means once the half-life has hit, 30 milligrams of that's going to be left in your system. And it's like at that dosage, the panic attacks and anxiety you're experiencing, it's very unlikely to be caused by panic attacks. So anyway, that's kind of what I was trying to explain in that video. And also that, I mean, the nocebo effect from caffeine goes very far. But the problem with that, and this is the reason why I don't make these videos anymore, is that your perception of how caffeine is going to work makes such a huge difference that people who strongly believe that caffeine is some kind of like extremely negative substance, and people who firmly believe that they have extremely negative side effects when they ingest caffeine, or like I'm just highly caffeine sensitive. If I drink a tiny cheap tea bag of green tea, I will like literally like lock up and almost have a heart attack. Like people will say stuff like that. It's like people who believe that, they're gonna think I'm crazy. They're gonna think I'm like working for big caffeine or something, and they won't listen to what I have to say. And then the people who are like, yeah, caffeine is, you know, whatever. So I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't feel like it mattered what I had to say, right, in regards to that. So I just left it alone because I've been on both ends. I've had extreme panic attacks and anxiety attacks at one point in my life, and cut out caffeine and, you know, for months on end. And then I've resolved panic attacks while drinking more caffeine than I ever have in my life. And so anyway, I think there's a lot more to that, the short-term negative effects of caffeine that people are not aware of. I've made videos about how different caffeine sources matter. And that's very important to understand, is like there are a lot of various compounds in coffee. So this is called the Entourage effect in Herbalism, where basically, let's say you have three different plants. Let's say you have two different plants, okay? Let's say you have Guayusa, which is basically yerba mate, but like a more calmer and grounding yerba mate, right? It's a more gentle yerba mate. It's almost like green tea without the bitterness. It's a much more light version of green tea almost, right? Then you have coffee, okay? So first of all, how your body reacts to coffee and Guayusa is going to be a bit different compared to other people. But generally speaking, Guayusa has L-theanine. It has epicatechin gallate, also known as ECGC. It has various types of other xanthines similar to caffeine, such as like theobromine and things of that nature. And it has a certain degree of caffeine as well. Most people who drink Guayusa just feel really clear-minded, really calm and grounded, and at the same time like a subtle stimulation. And stimulation almost like after you eat a really satisfying meal and you just feel good, right? That's the kind of satisfaction people tend to get from things like yerba mate and Guayusa, and sometimes green tea. But green tea is a lot more calming. Green tea, some really high-quality green teas and pu'er teas put me to sleep, okay? Because they're highly relaxing due to the entourage effect. Caffeine, it's subjective effects and what ultimately happens in your physiology is really going to be impacted by other compounds. Like there's a reason why so many people in the nootropics and biohacking communities, God bless their fucking souls, you all know what I think about that. The most popular stack, not only the most safest stack commonly recommended to beginners, but the most popular stack in the nootropics world is L-theanine in a 2-to-1 ratio with caffeine. Okay, and that's the reverse of what you find it usually in plant sources. Usually it's 2-to-1 caffeine to theanine. But the point is, when you mix theanine and caffeine together, you get a completely different effect, and it can be measured by brain activity. Alpha waves are increased with theanine ingestion. GABA is actually elevated, and the turnover of glutamate, the stimulating neurotransmitter caffeine normally promotes, turnover of glutamate into its antagonist GABA, the relaxing neurotransmitter, is upregulated with theanine ingestion. And so let me also say that the mechanism of action of freaking caffeine is still hotly debated, okay? Like we found certain effects of caffeine in the brain, but its main mechanism of action is still not clear. Same thing with a lot of psychoactive pharmaceutical drugs. But the problem is that so many people just repeat the shit that they've heard. That includes people with medical degrees and stuff like that. They just repeat the narrative that caffeine, its main mechanism of action is blocking the adenosine receptor. And by the way, there's multiple types of adenosine receptors. There are adenosine receptors that are responsible for wakefulness, and there's adenosine receptors that are responsible for sleep. Okay, and there's different types of the neurotransmitter adenosine as well. So it's more complicated than most people put it out. And that's why it's more beneficial to look at outcome data instead of mechanistic data. So when people are scared of caffeine, it's usually because they focus too much on the mechanistic data, none of which is really clear on caffeine and what its mechanism of effect actually is. And honestly, you hear about people who have ADHD who take like caffeine and then it calms them down, and there's people who take caffeine and then it puts them to sleep. Obviously, it's going to depend on the type as well. If you take it in the form of green tea, all the time I've taken green tea before sleep. When I first got into teas and stuff, that was a major thing that reversed my insomnia, was drinking green tea before bed. But if I drink fucking coffee before bed, that's not going to happen because they're completely different plants. Just because they have caffeine does not mean that they're going to have the same effect. And that's a huge error in most people's thinking. And so the long-term effects of caffeine, which is ultimately what he's asking, and caffeine addiction and stuff like that, they're going to have completely different effects on the long-term outcomes. And another thing, again, and this is why I stay away from talking about this, because most subjects are highly complicated, and most people just don't have the time or the willingness to sort through all the information to understand what's actually going on. In the scientific literature, okay, outcome data, people who like drink more beer, for example, just bear with me here. People who drink more beer tend to have more liver cancer and heart disease and whatever. And people who drink more wine tend to have lower rates of cancer and lower rates of heart disease, and is usually the narrative you hear in that dynamic. You'll hear a similar dynamic with coffee and tea. Like people who, or energy drinks, people who drink more energy drinks tend to have more diseases and blah, blah, blah. Whereas people who drink more coffee and tea have like lower rates of diseases and they're healthier. Okay, but the problem is that these are observational studies looking at people who live lifestyles that include one drink or the other. The actual mechanism that's causing these people's completely different health effects is very likely to not be due to whether they drink coffee or energy drinks. Okay? There should be a very obvious confounding variable right here. And even if they control for exercise and smoking and lifestyle, they don't actually control for all the variables that are really important in regards to whether you're living a healthy lifestyle or not. Okay? You cannot just weed out healthy user bias by asking these subjects in the study about their exercise or not. What I'm getting at here is that people who drink more energy drinks usually are generally unhealthy people. And the negative health effects that are commonly associated with things like energy drinks a lot of times has to do with the fact that these people are also drinking. They're probably drinking the sugar included ones. They're probably very sleep deprived, and low sleep doesn't always contribute to diseases either. Again, the overall lifestyle is that they're living life on the fucking edge. These people don't give a fuck about their health. They're drinking a bunch of sugar and all this other stuff. And it's like a whole stereotype of a lifestyle that's associated with energy drink consumption compared to coffee drinkers, right? Mind you, coffee drinking is extremely common, and pretty much everyone starts their day with coffee. So this is a little bit less clear. But if we're talking about coffee drinkers like in Italy who are, consuming an overall healthy lifestyle and healthy behavior patterns, these people are going to live longer because their overall lifestyle is healthier. Not because they drink coffee and there's polyphenols and this and that create better health outcomes. The common energy drink user is not intending to be healthy, right? But then a lot of people might be. But anyway, same dynamic goes on with alcohol consumption. You'll have like obviously people who drink beer. Who the fuck drinks beer as part of you're going out with your girlfriend and enjoying like a nice dinner with like Budweiser? No. Okay? People who drink wine, typically it's a different lifestyle. Even if you equate alcohol, they're living a life of moderation. Typically, this is just the healthy user bias aspect of this. When you drink wine, you're usually not drinking wine on the side of hamburgers, french fries, and sodas. But how many barbecues for football Sunday or whatever the hell they do? I don't even care. How many parties have you gone to, right, where people are drinking wine, red wine, especially Merlots and high quality red wine, whatever you think is high quality. Most people who are unhealthy are drinking beer. That's why beer is the number one form of alcohol that's associated with unhealthy, disease risk outcomes. Whereas red wine is always red wine is seen as healthy now. Everyone thinks red wine's fucking healthy, right? Just like everyone thinks that plant-based diets are healthy. So when you look at these population studies, you'll see people who drink the most green tea, people who drink the most coffee, people who drink the most red wine. You know what I mean? These people who eat a plant-based diet, they're going to have greater health outcomes because these are people who are trying to be healthy. Okay? All right. So that is really an argument for why caffeine consumption, you should be very skeptical when you see these studies that are like, coffee, people who drink the most coffee, tend to have lower risk of cancer and this and that, right? Because that's typically the type of scientific evidence you'll see people referencing when they say, no, coffee's healthy and this and that. By the way, I'm on my third fucking cup right now. I'm going to get to how to go about this in a healthy manner. So, healthy user bias. Look it up, okay? You need to look up healthy user bias, non-healthy user bias, and non-conformity, okay? What's really going on here is the long-term health benefits associated with red wine, plant-based diets, and green, like black coffee and green tea consumption versus energy drink consumption is that people who drink more energy drinks tend to live unhealthier lifestyles. Everyone that I know that really wants to be healthy are paranoid as fuck. They don't want to drink energy drinks because they think that aspartame or whatever, aspartame, these artificial sweeteners in the energy drinks are the devil. They think that the sugar is instantly going to grow tumors and stuff. Believe me, people who are trying to be healthy are scared to death of energy drinks. Okay? Even though for me, someone who's been on both sides of the fence of that belief system and has actually studied the research on this for front and back, I know now that you can drink energy drinks and be fine. Okay? You can drink artificial sweeteners and be fine. Okay? There's a degree of uncertainty, though, depending on how much you drink every day. But the point that I'm trying to make is healthy people normally opt for the more natural approach. The government has told them that this shit's healthy, therefore they go for it. So here's the thing, though. As far as you as an individual, another way to interpret all of this and it's very important to take into mind is that some of the longest living populations on the planet, there is heavy usage of caffeine in their society. Okay, so there's actually a book out there, and I looked through my closet because I have piles and piles of books. I don't even think I have enough wall space for bookshelves at this point to put all my textbooks. But I have a whole textbook on the history of fucking caffeine. And it's an amazing journey across the world. You'd be surprised, right? So first of all, caffeine consumption has been used in very high popularity in societies throughout varying degrees of life expectancy. There's been populations where the life expectancy is extremely low, especially through the first couple hundred years that caffeine was discovered. Life expectancy was like, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing here, but 30 to 60 years old on average. Very low life expectancy because infant birth was really, death at infancy was really high, like at childbirth is really high, and, unsanitary diseases and all this other stuff. But in Asian culture, where you've always seen high levels of health and life expectancy and stuff like that, okay, teas of various forms have been consumed like as just a daily ritual, okay, as just a part of their lifestyle. Pu'er tea, black tea, green tea, and these are mostly the kinds of things that I stick to personally, on top of my really heavy coffee consumption. But I drink you'd be amazed at the very powerful caffeinated plants I consume every morning. But their whole culture is about balance, right? Green tea, black tea, pu'er tea. These are the original tonic herbs. These plants have very powerful medicinal qualities and life-supporting building qualities in traditional Chinese medicine. Okay, and it has since been proven, or not proven, but it's been backed up by evidence in modern science. If you look through the scientific literature, you will see countless studies showing the effect, the health benefits of black tea, green tea, white tea, etc. Okay, in intervention trials, mechanistic studies, and population studies as well. And for me, the most important thing is that this is backed up by traditional Chinese medicine texts, thousands of years of texts on the medicinal practice and usage and application of black tea, green tea, pu'er tea, the caffeinated Camellia sinensis plants. Probably butchered that name, but whatever. And most people have, like in the Western society, do not drink tea properly. They usually get the tea bags, which are full of harsh tannins and other things that alone, without the caffeine, you take the decaffeinated stuff, it has a very astringent effect where it dries up your mouth, dehydrates you, and makes you feel like shit. And a lot of that's not because of the caffeine content. A lot of it's because people brew it wrong. They're drinking the really low quality stuff that's full of all sorts of harsh compounds that we really don't want. And people don't know how to select proper teas. They don't know that there's a difference. They don't know there's a difference in how you brew it and how long you brew it, how much tea leaves you use. There's a very lack of sophistication in Western society, and that's why you get a Walmart approach, and you get Walmart effects, and you get a Walmart warranty where people are just like, I'm just done with this tea. Right? Because I just don't do good with tea, right? Anyway. So I'm going to make a whole nother video talking about the health benefits of tea and the way that I use it and stuff like that. But let me say also, in this video I'm just going to focus on kind of more so like the negative effects and stuff, right? The potential negative effects. Look. The other way to interpret the scientific literature is that pretty much for a wide range of diseases, caffeine consumption has been observed to be associated with decreased risk. Okay, caffeine has been, in population studies observed to be associated with a lower risk of everything from heart disease, various forms of cancer, dementia, or Parkinson's disease. There's a lot of evidence that shows caffeine might potentially be beneficial, particularly in the form of coffee and tea, by the way. Energy drinks have a very negative association. And again, I think it's healthy user bias at play. But if we see such a wide range of differing effects from people who drink caffeine from energy drinks versus people who drink caffeine from coffee and tea. First of all, you see the caffeine's probably not actually the factor here. And most researchers claim it's due to the polyphenol content and probably the entourage effect of caffeine that we see better health benefits in the black coffee and the green tea groups, right? But the bigger picture here is the same thing I tell people about the carnivore dogma. These carnivore dieters, they're like, you know, they try to debunk the high vegetable intake decreasing risk of disease, saying, you know, vegetables will kill you and this and that, and any benefit you see in population studies is healthy user bias. But here's the thing that people miss. Okay, if caffeine was killing people, or if caffeine was really this negative substance, you would not see such a low risk of disease in a dose-dependent response. The more coffee and green tea people drink, the less dementia and Parkinson's, because this person specifically want to know about long-term effects on the brain. Okay? Pretty much the evidence suggests that if coffee and green tea is not beneficial per se, is not the cause of people having lower risk of dementia and Parkinson's disease, at the very least, caffeine consumption in the form of coffee and green tea does not have a negative impact on Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's in the long term. Okay? If the majority of the evidence suggests people who drink more fucking coffee and green tea have a lower risk of all of these like forms of disease and mortality as they get older, including diseases of the brain and depression. Okay? What does that tell you? That tells you, hey man, if anything, it has a positive effect. Or if anything, caffeine consumption does not hinder my health going in the long term, okay? Because what you would see, if caffeine was such a negative substance in the long-term studies, you would see it reflected. You'd see, oh my God, like more people drink, you know, the more that people drink coffee or whatever, the more coffee people drink as, you know, over the long term, the worse their health becomes. But you don't see that. You don't see that. So there's two different ways to interpret that scientific evidence, okay? But what I'm trying to get at here is that caffeine is unlikely to be severely negative in the long term. And again, like I said, like we have these populations of people in various places in China, they drink different forms of green tea and black tea and have different health outcomes. In Okinawa, in the Mediterranean cultures, right, with all, you know, the people of Crete, coffee is a huge part of their culture in those European countries. Costa Rica is one of the world's highest coffee producers, and they consume and they produce the highest amount of coffee, and they consume a large amount of coffee, and they also are a blue zone, okay. And don't get me started on the anecdotes of how many people, you know, the longest living population or the longest living people in the world, the supercentenarians. How many of these people you hear who live over 110 years old or whatever, who are like, yeah, I drink a lot of coffee and, you know, and maybe they smoke 2 cigarettes a day and this and that, right? But coffee tends to be a very integral part of these supercentenarians' lifestyle. And by the way, I personally have a unique idea, a philosophy, a unique assumption on why people can smoke 2 cigarettes a day, drink alcohol and whatnot, and live over 100. And I don't think they're an exception per se. I think there's a mechanism involved that keeps people living longer. So I'm going to make another video on why these like people who say, oh, I lived over 120 and I smoked 2 cigarettes a day or whatever, why they can live so long without cancer and stuff from smoking cigarettes, and why the average person is probably going to get cancer if they smoke cigarettes. I think that there is a mechanism involved. But anyway, coffee does not seem to be ultimately problematic over the long term, okay? There's other risks at play. And so the ultimate kind of thing here in this video, and I'm going to kind of make another video where I suggest a solution, how you can have your cake and eat it too, how you can drink coffee and these caffeinated plants and stuff like that, and you can neutralize any kind of negative effect you might have. And it's what I do, and I feel amazing now. But let's talk about you and as an individual, okay? So you say I'm hopelessly addicted and can only imagine. So why are you trying to quit coffee, first of all? So yes, coffee or caffeine is an addictive substance. And yes, you sound like you're addicted to coffee. You have said literally the classic symptoms of caffeine, okay? Or of addiction, okay? Really, an addiction is when you experience significant negative effects of something, you know something's bad for you, but you can't stop doing it. That is an addiction, okay? But I would say there's more to it, but still. And you say you managed to quit drinking coffee for 2 weeks at best. So you're trying really hard and intending to stop drinking caffeine, but you can't for longer than 2 weeks. So I could tell you how to, over the long term, remove, get over this addiction. Okay, but my question to you is actually, why are you trying to stop in the first place? Okay, if you're just experiencing anxiety or acid reflux, okay, acid reflux is not caused by coffee. It's not caused by acidic foods, first of all. But a lot of people, they try to stop coffee because they think it's causing acid reflux. No, it's triggering it, but there's an underlying cause of acid reflux that if you address, coffee won't trigger it anymore. Okay? If it's anxiety, I'm going to make another video where I tell you how you can drink coffee and never experience anxiety ever. Okay? If you're trying to stop coffee just because you're following a bunch of gurus who are telling you, oh my God, it's going to cause all these health problems. It's like a cortisol bomb. It's a cortisol bomb. It increases cortisol, therefore it's bad. Those motherfuckers are operating on the lowest form of scientific evidence and rigor, and that is maybe not intentionally. I think a lot of people say these things to stir controversy so that they can get more a following and build a cult. People will create an artificial problem and get you reliant upon them to fix that problem that doesn't even exist over the long term. I find this time and time again. People say, you have adrenal fatigue. That's why you're suffering. You need to remove cortisol, and you need to take these supplements that I sell to overcome cortisol and eat this crazy diet that's not sustainable. It's only going to make your problems worse to overcome this problem. And it becomes like this thing where they give you these solutions that are actually making shit worse. And you keep looking to them for more and more answers and shit, so that you're heavily dependent on them and feeding them money and views and all sorts of things. That's what people fucking do, and it's terrible. And I've had too many clients who can't shake that, and they're convinced that they have this crazy problems, and we solve their problems, and they're still convinced there's something wrong with them because they're so used to all these gurus who feed them into that circle. And it's like they find someone like me who doesn't bullshit them, and then they can't handle it. But so yeah. Reflect on why you want to stop coffee. But I'm going to make a whole nother video where I explain, hey, you could drink coffee and you'll be fine forever, right? But yeah, the cortisol thing, it's a non-issue. It really is a non-issue. And once you put into play the protocol I'm going to tell you in the next video, you'll realize, oh man, coffee's not that bad if I do all this, if I drink it the right way. As far as the long-term use on the brain, it's not like cocaine, man. It's not like cocaine, right? It can have effects like cocaine if you take isolated caffeine in a really large amount. If you're drinking a whole pot, I don't know, if you're drinking the equivalent of 1,000 milligrams a day, all day, every day, yeah, it's probably not good. But for me, I literally brew... I put 6 tablespoons of coffee grounds in my coffee maker. Then I put 2 tablespoons of yerba mate and 2 tablespoons of guayusa. And I brew that shit all day. And I just brew the same pot over and over again. Because as long as you're using the same grounds and leaves, you're not going to go over too badly, even though you can really extract a shit ton of caffeine from like 1 tablespoon of beans. You'd be surprised. But because of the way I do this, I don't experience bad effects, right? And that's another interesting tidbit. People in South America drink a shit ton of caffeine from yerba mate. Yerba mate's consumed like water, and it has been for thousands of years. Same thing with Guayusa, the people of the rainforest or whatever that consume that. They literally just they fill up a gourd, like a whole 6-ounce cup or whatever, full of yerba mate leaves. Yerba mate has a lot of caffeine. Okay, believe it or not, yerba mate and green tea has more caffeine per ounce of leaves than coffee grounds, believe it or not. And they just pour more water in and more water in and more water in, and they drink it straight out of that cup. That's a lot of caffeine over the long term. But because of the way they drink it and the fact that their body builds a tolerance, like your brain builds a tolerance to it, okay? But they don't experience that. In fact, yeah, so I'm just going to put that out there. So I'll make another video where I kind of present the solution to any problem you might have with caffeine and basically what I do. But I believe if you drink it in the form of coffee, yerba mate, green tea, that there is an overall hormetic effect over the long term that helps you live longer. I believe there's a lot of brain-boosting compounds that have been shown. There's a lot of the evidence is pretty strong that things like catecholamines, epicatechin gallate, and some of these other polyphenols in these teas and coffee as well. The cholinergic acid, which I made a video about a long time ago in 2015. It can promote brain-derived neurotropic factor and nerve growth factor, which actually promotes the growth of neurons in your brain long term. And there's some experts, some researchers in the field that believe the anti-Parkinson's and anti-dementia effect, supposedly, from these drinks. They believe it's due to these polyphenols. And there's some polyphenols in yerba mate, for example, that promotes the protection of dopamine neurons. So, and there's like an upregulation of receptors over time to compensate from the blockage of certain receptors, like on adenosine and stuff like that. So if you try to withdraw from caffeine, that's why it'll have really severe negative side effects. But I've seen time and time again, another good example is something like Mucuna pruriens. You have all these people like, oh my God, Mucuna's going to kill you because it has L-dopa in it that increases dopamine. And then you have levodopa, the actual drug extracted from the bean, that does definitely have documented negative side effects. You see literally zero scientific evidence that the whole plant Mucuna will kill people unless they eat it in the raw form. That's the only documented case of people in the region it was grown who were experiencing a famine consumed whole Mucuna beans raw with the protease inhibitors and all that stuff, and they developed psychosis and all sorts of problems, as well as muscle protein breakdown due to chronic malnourishment and the anti-nutrients found in the raw Mucuna bean. But you don't see that. You've never seen any other evidence outside of that. And it is extremely unlikely for that to ever happen in commercially available Mucuna products, because the trypsin inhibitors or the protease inhibitors don't exist in Mucuna extracts. And so it becomes a matter of, are you consuming the isolated drug caffeine, or are you consuming the isolated drug L-dopa, or are you consuming the whole plant form, the actual Mucuna bean, or the actual caffeine bean, and you brew it or you cook it or you prepare it the way it's traditionally been done to get the effects you're intending in the right doses? Or are you consuming some kind of standardized extract, which, so anyway, that's what I'm going to say right now, okay? If you want more specific information, ask me in the comments about the specific topics you want me to cover on this, because I can really go deep into any aspect of this. It's just that there's so many parts of this to cover. It's like, where do I even begin? So I just blared out all this information that just comes naturally to my brain. But I'm going to make another video about how to consume this stuff in the best way possible. All right. Leave your question, comments down below, and I'll talk to y'all next time.